to bind nations together. They often emphasize process over result, believing that ultimately process can become substance. This European portrait is a dual caricature, of course, with its share of exaggerations and oversimplifications. One cannot generalize about Europeans. Britons may have a more American view of power than many Europeans on the continent. Their memory of empire, the special relationship with the United States forged in World War II and at the dawn of the Cold War, and their historically aloof position with regard to the rest of Europe tend to set them apart. Nor can one simply lump French and Germans together, the first proud and independent but also surprisingly insecure, the second mingling self-confidence with self-doubt since the end of the Second World War. Meanwhile, the nations of Eastern and Central Europe have an entirely different history from their Western European neighbors, a historically rooted fear of Russian power, and consequently a more American view of the Hobbesian realities. And of course there are differing perspectives within nations on both sides of the Atlantic. French Gaullists are not the same as French socialists. In the United States, Democrats often seem more European than Republicans. Secretary of State Colin Powell may appear more European than Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. Many Americans, especially among the intellectual elite, are as uncomfortable with the hard quality of American foreign policy as any European, and some Europeans value power as much as any American. Nevertheless, the caricatures do capture an essential truth. The United States and Europe are fundamentally different today. Powell and Rumsfeld have more in common than do Powell and the foreign ministers of France, Germany, or even Great Britain. When it comes to the use of force, most mainstream American Democrats have more in common with Republicans than they do with most Europeans. During the 1990s, even American liberals were more willing to resort to force, and were more Manichaean in their perception of the world than most of their European counterparts. The Clinton administration bombed Iraq as well as Afghanistan and Sudan. Most European governments, it is safe to say, would not have done so, and were indeed appalled at American militarism. Whether Europeans even would have bombed Belgrade in 1999 had the United States not forced their hand is an interesting question. This past October, a majority of Senate Democrats supported the resolution authorizing President Bush to go to war with Iraq, while their political counterparts in France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, and even the United Kingdom looked on in amazement and some horror. What is the source of these differing strategic perspectives? The question has received too little attention in recent years. Foreign policy intellectuals and policymakers on both sides of the Atlantic have denied the existence of genuine differences, or sought to make light of present disagreements, noting that the transatlantic alliance has had moments of tension in the past. Those who have taken the present differences more seriously, especially in Europe, have been more interested in assailing the United States than in understanding why the United States acts as it does, or, for that matter, why Europe acts as it does. It is past time to move beyond the denial and the insults, and to face the problem head-on. Despite what many Europeans and some Americans believe, these differences in strategic culture do not spring naturally from the national characters of Americans or Europeans. What Europeans now consider their more peaceful strategic culture is, historically speaking, quite new. It represents an evolution away from the very different strategic culture that dominated Europe for hundreds of years, at least until World War I. The European governments and peoples who enthusiastically launched themselves into that continental war believed in Machtpolitik. They were fervent nationalists who had been willing to promote the national idea through force of arms, as the Germans had under Bismarck, or to promote égalité and fraternité with the sword, as Napoleon had attempted earlier in the century, or to spread the blessings of liberal civilization through the cannon's mouth, as the British had throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. The European order that came into being with the unification of Germany in 1871 was, like all its predecessors, created by war. While the roots of the present European worldview, like the roots of the European Union itself, can be traced back to the Enlightenment, Europe's great power politics for the past 300 years did not follow the visionary designs of the philosophes and the physiocrats. As for the United States, there is nothing timeless about the present heavy reliance on force as a tool of international relations, nor about the tilt toward unilateralism and away from a devotion to international law. Americans are children of the Enlightenment too, and, in the early years of the Republic, were more faithful apostles of its creed. At its birth, America was the great hope of Enlightenment Europeans, who despaired of their own continent and viewed America as the one place where reason and humanity might develop more rapidly than anywhere else. The rhetoric, if not always the practice, of early American foreign policy was suffused with the principles of the Enlightenment. American statesmen of the late 18th century, like the European statesmen of today, extolled the virtues of commerce as the soothing balm of international strife, and appealed to international law and international opinion over brute force. The young United States wielded power against weaker peoples on the North American continent, but when it came to dealing with the European giants, it claimed to abjure power and assailed as atavistic the power politics of the 18th and 19th century.